In this episode of Locked On Capitals, the Washington Capitals fall to the Carolina Hurricanes 6-1. It was a big night for John Carlson, and Conor McMichael sees a bit of a promotion as he plays center tonight. Locked On Capitals starts right now.
Locked On Capitals, your daily podcast on the Washington Capitals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Well, hello and welcome in to this episode of Locked On Capitals. I'm so glad you decided to join me today. My name is Dan Holme. I host this podcast for Locked On Capitals. You can find me on Twitter, DanCaps218. And I want to thank you for making this podcast your first listen or view of the day. Yes, we are also available on YouTube, so head on over there and hit that little bell in the corner. As always, we are free and available on all the major platforms. All right, the Capitals lost a big one tonight, 6-1. It wasn't the outcome that we had hoped for. They played really big all weekend. They won two big games against the Sabres and the Devils, and then they fall tonight. We'll talk about that. Also, the big night, the milestone night for John Carlson, and then the kind of bit of a promotion, I guess I got to say, for Conor McMichael. But all right, to the task at hand, the Washington Capitals fall to the Carolina Hurricanes tonight, and it wasn't the game that we had hoped for. I going into this game, I was a bit hopeful, I got to say. I'm like, maybe they can find a way to win this game. They beat them the last time they played. They are playing in DC after all. I thought, there's a pretty good chance. And this is what the games that the Capitals have to win. I mean, I'm glad that they were able to beat the Sabres and the Devils, but these are the games that really are going to test a team because these are the kind of teams that you are going to play in the playoffs. And if you're lucky, the Stanley Cup. So the Capitals don't have a whole lot of time to sit there and lick their wounds. They just got to move on. They do have some time off. Their next game is against Minnesota, and that is on Sunday night. So hopefully, they can get some practices in, maybe have some of these injured players return, and just figure out what they're going to do out there. Because as they make this push for the playoffs, they have no time to take their foot off the gas. So tonight it was the Caps versus the Canes. And the biggest issue that the Capitals faced was Freddie Andersen in net. Yes, Freddie Andersen, the goalie that played for the Toronto Maple Leafs for years, is now playing on the Carolina Hurricanes and playing a big role. He is a big man out there. Freddie Andersen is 31-10-3 with a 2.07 goals against average and a .926 save percentage against Vanacek, and that was the wise decision. On paper, that seemed like a slam dunk. Vanacek is 17-9-5 with a 2.45 goals against average and a .917 save percentage. So on paper, it seemed like a sound decision by Peter Laviolette and all the coaching staff that you put your best netminder out there. And that's what they did. And Vanacek played so-so. I mean, I think that he made some big stops, but he also kind of let in some pucks that I think that he should have stopped. So Carolina has an 80% win percentage when they score first. And that was kind of the first sign that, maybe this game isn't going to go quite the way that we had hoped for. Nick Dowd was out in this game and Janssen Fjällby in. And some of that is, with Dowd out, that was the line that had Hathaway and Hagelin earlier in the year. So I knew that was kind of off, but you got to kind of give it up for Janssen Fjällby. He's got wheels out there, and he's had some really big goal-scoring opportunities out there. He didn't make any good on them, but nonetheless, I think that he played well. All right, so the game starts, and then to start it off, Stefan gets his goal. It's his 8th of the season, and the Carolina Hurricanes are up 1-0. And, kind of tying in with that statistic, if they score first, that 80% of the time they win the game. So this game kind of just fell right in line with those statistics. And then Notches gets the second goal, and Carolina is up 2-0 on a tic-tac-toe goal. And this Carolina team is, it's coached well and it's running on all cylinders. I think that this team, the Carolina Hurricanes, if the Capitals don't do well, I think that the Carolina Hurricanes stand to do really well in the Metro moving forward. I would like to think that the Capitals will ultimately go on and do bigger and better things in the playoffs, but I got to say, this Carolina team is stacked. It is a younger team, and they play a big physical game, and it was more than the Capitals could handle most of the game. And if there was one thing I could change about this game, is I would say that the Capitals should have upped their game a little bit more. There should have been more hitting from Wilson, Ovechkin, Mantha, Hathaway, all these guys out there. They should have brought a bigger game, because I think that would have destabilized the Carolina Hurricanes, because they brought a big physical presence, and they ended up being the victors in this game. So I know it's a little bit Monday morning quarterbacking here, but I think that that's what the Capitals need to do. When they play these teams out there that bring a big physical game, you have to bring a bigger physical game. And there's not a lack of guys on the Washington Capitals that could do that. There is some big frames out there on the Washington Capitals. So that's what I would do the next time they play an opponent such as this, is just bring a bigger physical game if you plan on beating a team such as this. So, and then Carolina is bringing the pressure early, and that's how they ended up getting those 2 goals. They brought a lot of offensive power. Carolina bringing the pressure early. Smith cross-checked on Oshie. Then Caps go to the power play. Oshie gets his stick ripped by Stahl out of his hands. He retaliates and gets the penalty. And that was kind of the one that kind of mitigated, or it disallowed Alex Ovechkin's goal, because TJ Oshie had his stick ripped out of his hands by Stahl, and so then Oshie retaliated on Stahl and ripped his stick out, and he gets called for the penalty. And, when he asked the refs, he's like, well, what's going on here? How come I got the penalty? Why didn't Stahl get the penalty? Their excuse was like, we didn't see it. So I guess it's one of those things of hear no evil, see no evil. But, I don't know. This just doesn't sit so well with the refs out there. I know that the refs out there, they get a lot of heat for missing calls or making bad calls. I got to say that this didn't really help their case. So into the second, the Caps are playing a bigger physical game and a tighter defense to start the second. And I had a good feeling, they're going in there. Maybe Peter Laviolette kind of just whipped them into shape into the locker room and told them what they need to work on. And then not just penalty elbowing, John Carlson caps to the power play. So like I say, bigger physical game, tighter defense, and the Capitals go to the power play. Wilson goal on a rebound off Anderson. Wilson 5-point streak. So Wilson kind of going out there and doing Wilson stuff, which is bringing a big physical game and scoring goals. And he did it. He got the Capitals on the board. So I was like, yes, the second period, things are going well. Wilson gets him on the board, but then Sebastian Aho, shorthanded goal, beat Johansson in a one-on-one breakaway. Carolina up 3-1. And it was one of those things that I don't think Marcus Johansson could have really done anything about. He just got outworked by Sebastian Aho. And this Carolina team is stacked. They have offensive power at every corner. And like I say, they just got outworked in this one. McMichael got a penalty ripped for ripping off Trocheck's helmet, and that's one of the things you can't do. It seemed like that McMichael playing the center position kind of just lit a fire under him, and he was way more aggressive than he normally was. We like to see that. That kind of ties in with what I was talking about earlier. We love the physical game of McMichael, but you can't commit the stupid penalties. You can't rip your opponent's helmet off, and he got called for it. Surprise, surprise. So then Pesci gets a goal. It's 4-1 Carolina, and this is when the wheels start falling off this game for the Washington Capitals. Pesci gets a goal. Carolina up 4-1, and then Tom Wilson is pissed off out there. Tom Wilson destroys Trocheck in a mid-ice hit. And that, it's maybe a little bit too much, a little bit too late. That is the physical game that the Capitals needed to bring earlier to help minimize the impact of the Carolina Hurricanes. They had to just, destroy them into the boards to kind of get them off their game. But it was a little bit too much, a little bit too late. And then Netchis gets a goal. It's 5-1. at the end of the second. And, then we just know it's not going so great. They're just, in all ways and intents and purposes, they are outplaying the Washington Capitals. So then we get into the third, and Freddie Anderson continues to play big, and he played big the entire game. Freddie Anderson goes on to get the win, and the Canes score one final time. Final score 6-1. Ilya Samsonov was out there to start the third period. But, that was just kind of one of those things. I think that they were looking to get a momentum change because, at that point, what did they have to lose? So, like I say, the Capitals can't waste too much time licking their wounds. They should watch some film and get some good practices in and hopefully get some players back that were, potentially injured. Hopefully they can come back. But they got to move on to the next one because guess what? The Minnesota Wild are also a big opponent. They got Marc-Andre Fleury, and they have a ton of firepower as well. So they got to be ready. They can't just sit there and dwell on what went wrong tonight. They got to move on to the next one. So hopefully they can do that. All right, after the break, we are going to talk about the bigger role for Conor McMichael and a bit of a promotion, I guess I got to say. Conor McMichael, who normally plays on the wing, he got promoted into being a forward, and I think he played pretty well out there. But first, after months of playing, college basketball has determined the top teams for the Final Four and will determine this year's national championship this coming week. BetOnline.net is your number one source for all your betting needs and sports info. From all the latest odds, contests, and player props, you name it, BetOnline remains the best spot for all your latest sports developments, including podcasts and reviews for all the leagues this season. And it's not just basketball. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sports wagering information needs, including live betting and your favorite Vegas casino games. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and action. Bet online, where the game starts. And that's what I'm talking about when I was watching the Final Four there. It always makes it that much more exciting when you have some money on the game or any of the games. You don't have to put in a lot of money. That's what's great about Bet Online. Kind of gets you involved in the game and win some money doing it. Thank you, Bet Online. All right. And in this next segment, we're going to talk about the bigger role of Conor McMichael. But first, we're going to talk about Locked On Now. You don't need to go to the big networks to get the scores and the updates. Locked On Now has their own insiders that cover every team in the NHL, and Locked On Now will bring you all the latest breaking news going around on the NHL. So make sure and head over to Locked On Now. All right. In this segment, like I talked about, we are going to talk about the bigger role of Conor McMichael out there. I think that he deserves it. I think that he's put in his time. Like I say, he's got a lot of opportunities, and now just kind of a chance to see what he can do at the center position. But before we go any further, if you're watching on YouTube, I'm rocking the Hershey Bears jersey tonight. I got this jersey actually in Hershey. And if you ever get a chance to go check out a game in Hershey, it is a great opportunity. It's a top-level facility, and it's just a minor difference between that and the NHL. So much fun. So just thought I'd check that out. Got to rock the Hershey Bears jersey tonight. All right, so get into this second segment here. I'm going to talk about the bigger role of Conor McMichael. And Laviolette said, Mikey's done a really good job in the middle the last 6 to 8 games. Larson plays some better. Johansson plays a little bit of center. Now we've got lots of centers inside the lineup. That's a real positive. And then there was the potential of Eller potentially moving to the wing. He ended up playing center. It's probably been like 6 years since I've played there. I have played there before, so it's not like completely new to me. Obviously, I'm more comfortable at center, but you have to be able to adapt, and it's a good thing to be versatile, and it is. But Conor McMichael deserves that spot, I think, at least to try it at center, because as we make a push towards the playoffs, you want to see what players do the best at certain positions. And I think that that's what they need to do. And I think that, like I say, I think that Conor McMichael actually played pretty good tonight. It seemed to kind of revitalize him and get him more involved into the game. If you look at McMichael, the last month or two, he got a lot of chances in. He didn't make good on a lot of them, but he was getting those shots on net, and that's what's important. A lot of times when those players are snake bitten, they don't even get shots on net. But Conor McMichael is one of the young Capitals on the team that is going to be the future of the team. Let's face it, Alex Ovechkin, Nick Backstrom, John Carlson, TJ Oshie, they're all getting older. We need to pepper in these younger players so they are ready for when those other players either move on to other teams or they retire. Let's face it, Conor McMichael is the future. Martin Feravari is the future. They're Leeson, Protas, Hendricks Lapierre. These are all the future of the Washington Capitals, and sooner or later, we're just going to have to slowly work more and more of them into the lineup. Because I know that, you hear a lot around Capitals, around the Washington Capitals, that this is win now mode and that window is shutting. And it is shutting ever so slightly, I guess I got to say. Alex Ovechkin and Nick Backstrom have deals, so it's not like it's going to happen next year. But I think that to prepare for the future, so you don't deal with one of these big rebuilds like the Rangers had or the Detroit Red Wings had, is that you have to kind of slowly integrate some of these younger players into the lineup, because otherwise that's what you're up against. All of a sudden, these players like Ovechkin and Backstrom, they're going to retire or move on to other teams, and then you're stuck in this big laborious rebuild. So good on the Capitals for kind of slowly working in some of these players, because they are the future of the Washington Capitals, and good on Lars Eller for being, willing to play in any position. A lot of times these guys that have been in the league for a long time, they're like, I don't want to play this position. I don't want to play that position. But if you want to have longevity in the National Hockey League, that's what you got to do. You got to go where the coach tells you to play. You can't just kind of pick wherever you want to play. Otherwise, you're just going to end up sitting on the bench or in the press box. So it's good that they're kind of reworking these lines. I know they had Marcus Johansson on the top line for a while, then it was Tom Wilson. I think that the best line that the Washington Capitals have on that top line is it's Ovechkin, Backstrom, and Wilson. Like Kuznetsov does a pretty good job centering that top line as well, but I think that ultimately what Laviolette is trying to do, and what he's trying to do, is just spread out some of that scoring potential. It's had some pretty good results. Like I say, I don't want to just totally, redo the entire line pairings just because of how they played tonight. Obviously, they got outworked by the Carolina Hurricanes, but they have some time to take a look at that film and look at what they did wrong, because I think that the Capitals played okay. It's just that, like I say, they just got outworked, period. But, I mean, that's what you're going to be up against as you head towards the playoffs. You're going to face teams like the Carolina Hurricanes. The Washington Capitals could play the Carolina Hurricanes in the playoffs. It could be that case. And if it's not them, it's been rumored or it's been talked about, depending on how everything shakes out, that the Washington Capitals could play the Panthers, another great team. That's how it works. You're not going to make it to the playoffs and play this team that's really easy. So the Capitals got to get ready for these kind of opponents like the Carolina Hurricanes. They got outworked, and they need to figure it out. Again, like I talked about earlier, my takeaway from this game tonight is bring a bigger physical game. The Washington Capitals have the body sizes out there. They got Mantha, they got Wilson, they got Ovechkin. They got some guys that are willing to mix it up out there. They just need to utilize them. So after the break, we are going to talk about the big night, the potential for John Carlson. It's this month of March is just a milestone month, isn't it? And they just keep coming one after the other. And it's going to be a big night here for John Carlson. But first, with the ever-increasing numbers and makes of models, it's now impossible for your local chain auto parts store to stock all the parts you need. Why endure often pointless or seemingly intimidating questioning and wait in line to deal with these auto parts guys that just try to make you feel like you don't know what you're talking about? I like to go to Rock Auto because I can shop from home. I don't need to go to the auto parts store and just deal with whatever they're selling me. I can go to Rock Auto that has a great selection. So save time and money when using Rock Auto. Why choose to spend 30, 50, or even 100% more for the same parts from a chain store or car dealership? Rock Auto is a family business serving do-it-yourselfers for over 20 years. Rock Auto prices are reliably low for every customer. They have everything you could need: brake parts, tail lamps, motor oil, and even carpet. So go explore their easy-to-use website to find the solution for your parts needs. Go to rockauto.com right now and see all the parts available for your car or truck right locked on in there. How did you hear about us box so they know we sent you? That's right. Go to rockauto.com right locked in on the how did you hear about us box so they know we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. rockauto.com. Thanks, Rock Auto. So in this final segment, like I was saying, it's getting noteworthy for tonight is John Carlson. John Carlson is expected to pass Dale Hunter for the sixth most games played in the NHL history tonight against the Carolina Hurricanes. Carlson has recorded 22 points, 2 goals, and 20 assists in his last 22 games. Since this span, which began on February 1st, Carlson ranks third among defensemen in points, only behind Nashville's Roman Josi and Colorado's Cale Makar. Carlson currently ranks 7th among defensemen in points, 55, tied for 7th in goals, 11 and 8 in assists, 44. In addition, he ranks first in franchise history in points among defensemen with 577 points. That's 126 goals, 451 assists. With 451 assists, Carlson ranks third in franchise history, only trailing Nicholas Backstrom with 742 and Alex Ovechkin for 626. And, that's John Carlson is that steady hand out there. He rarely misses time because he's sick or he's ill. And he carries a bulk of the mail for the Washington Capitals defense. And don't just call him a defenseman. He's a legitimate goal scorer out there. So he's contributing so much to this team, and that's what they're talking about there. He has a long string of assists and games played. And just to kind of go along with this milestone month of Alex Ovechkin and Nick Backstrom, and it just kind of goes along. Like I said before, this month in March of 2022 will be one for the Washington Capitals to remember. All kinds of milestones: Alex Ovechkin's milestones, Nick Backstrom's, and now John Carlson's. Just big news all around, and good on John Carlson. And I'm glad that we have him under a deal for a few more years, because could you imagine that Caps blue line without John Carlson? I really would not like to think about that. So the Capitals coming up are playing the Minnesota Wild this Sunday. That's going to be one of those big games. Like I said, they picked up Marc-Andre Fleury, and they picked up some other big names. And the Minnesota Wild were one of the teams that went heavy. They went big. They went all for it. The Minnesota Wild felt like they were on the cusp of doing bigger and better things. And I guess time will only tell if they are destined for bigger or better things. Oftentimes when teams make these big moves, either that player doesn't have chemistry with the other players on the team, or for whatever reason, I've seen, where teams moved heaven and earth to get a player, and God forbid that player gets injured. Could you imagine that if Andre Fleury got injured on the Minnesota Wild after all the things they moved around to get him on the team? So anyway, the Minnesota Wild are the Capitals' next opponent, and it's going to be a big one. And like I've said in this entire podcast, you can't just want to beat teams that are easy to beat. I mean, I know beating teams like the Sabres and the Devils, that makes you feel good. You're like, oh, those are some big wins. But consider those teams. Both of those teams, they brought big physical games, as well as, can you sense the common theme going on here? Teams are bringing big physical games, because that's what you got to do to compete in the National Hockey League. But I'm talking about there, it's easy to beat those teams and feel good about beating teams like the Sabres or the Devils, but to really have credibility, you need to beat these teams that are better than you. And let's be honest, the Carolina Hurricanes, look at the rankings, are better than the Washington Capitals. They've got to find a way to beat them, because if it's not them, like I said, it's going to be the Florida Panthers or some team similar to that. And then if you beat them, it's going to even be a harder opponent. or more difficult opponent. So there's a lot of questions that need to be answered. Did the Washington Capitals do enough at the trade deadline? I know that they went through that stretch there where they didn't lose a game in regulation and everyone was drinking the Kool-Aid. Brian McClellan and myself a bit included, but tonight kind of exposed a vulnerability with the Washington Capitals. Do they have the depth to make a push in the playoffs? Hit me up on Twitter, DanCaps218. Did you think the Washington Capitals did enough? And do you think this Capitals team is built for the playoffs? I don't want to say that Vitek Vanacek didn't play big enough, but he didn't play bigger than Freddie Anderson on the other end of the ice. So, and there's a lot of variables in that as well. Did the Caps defense fold in front of them, or did they bring as big of a game as the Carolina Hurricanes did? Those are some questions that the Capitals are going to have to answer this week, because, like I say, they have no time to kind of just sit and dwell on this failure, because that's what it was. That what this loss tonight was a failure, and it was kind of it was a statement win for the Carolina Hurricanes. I mean, 6-1. I mean, it wasn't like they lost by a goal. This was a shootout, and it was a blowout, and they did it in DC, which typically doesn't happen. So, like I say, the Capitals, they got some time to figure it out here, but they don't want to sit there and think about it too long, because this road is going to get more difficult as the Capitals go. They had those stretch of easier games, but now it's where the rubber meets the road. All right, that is the Locked On Capitals podcast for today. I want to thank you for joining me today. And tomorrow, on tomorrow's podcast, I'm going to talk about the new goaltender that the Washington Capitals signed. Yes, I talked about it before, but it's official today. The Washington Capitals, they signed a new goaltender. So we got a new goaltender in the pipeline. I don't want to talk about it too much, but it's already been mentioned earlier, but you'll have to tune in tomorrow's show where I'm going to talk more about that goaltender. He's from Dartmouth, and I think that he is going to be a great goaltender in the Washington Capitals pipeline. So wherever he's slated, in the future, if he's playing in Carolina or if he's playing in Hershey, let's hope that eventually he ends up playing in Washington sooner or later, because, just on paper and looking at his statistics, I think he looks pretty solid. And I think that, it just kind of continues in the pedigree of the Washington Capitals that they always draft or pick up these big goalies. I don't think that he will be any exception. So thank you again for joining me on this episode of Locked On Capitals. Now make your second listen. Locked On Fantasy Hockey host Steele Roden and Flip Livingstone help you become the expert of your fantasy league. It's free and available wherever you get your podcasts. So again, thanks again for joining me on this episode of Locked On Capitals. We'll talk to you guys again tomorrow. Have a great day.